brought to you by Soundlibra.com. You can find a direct link to our full library in the description of this audio, or visit us anytime at Soundlibra.com. Welcome to Emotional First Aid. We start building your personal toolkit today.
That's right, Alex. We all experience emotional challenges. Having the right tools makes a difference.
Just a quick heads up before we get started. The strategies we're discussing are for general self-care and aren't a substitute for professional medical or mental health advice. Always consult with a qualified professional for your specific needs.
That's an important point. So, instead of letting a small emotional hurt grow worse, we can use these first aid techniques to manage it right when it happens. That makes a lot of sense. How is it different from medical first aid, then?
Traditional medical first aid focuses on physical injuries. Emotional first aid provides immediate comfort and coping strategies for emotional distress. It's not meant to cure deep psychological conditions, but rather to equip you with simple skills for navigating everyday challenges. We're talking about feelings like disappointment, frustration, sadness, or feeling completely overwhelmed.
So it's proactive and preventive. It's about building resilience. What kind of emotional wounds are we talking about specifically?
We'll explore common emotional wounds throughout this series. Think about the sting of rejection, the weight of failure, the ache of loneliness, getting stuck in rumination, the burden of guilt, the pain of loss, and the slow erosion of self-esteem. These are all very human experiences that can leave us feeling vulnerable.
Those sound like significant challenges. It's actually comforting to know there are practical ways to address them. How does building this toolkit actually work? It sounds a little abstract.
We'll break it down into manageable steps. Imagine your emotional first aid kit as a carefully curated collection of helpful items. Each tool in this kit is a specific technique or strategy designed for a particular emotional need. One tool might be a way to reframe a negative thought that's bothering you, while another could be a simple breathing exercise to calm your nerves.
So it's not a one-size-fits-all solution. Different situations will require different tools.
Precisely. These tools are designed to be easily accessible and quick to apply. You don't need to be a trained therapist to use them. They are practical, actionable strategies you can use in the moment when you feel emotional discomfort. We want to empower you to be your own first responder when it comes to your emotional well-being.
That's a really powerful image, being your own first responder for your emotions. What's the very first step in assembling this essential kit?
The absolutely first step, before you even think about acquiring a tool, is learning to identify your emotional wounds. You need to know if you have a cut or a bruise before you can treat it effectively. Similarly, you need to recognize what kind of emotional pain you're actually experiencing. This involves paying close attention to your feelings, your thoughts, and even your physical sensations.
So, before we can choose a tool, we first need to understand the problem itself. That leads us perfectly into our next episode.
It absolutely does. In episode 2, we'll take a deep dive into recognizing the ache, identifying your emotional wounds. We'll explore how to really tune into your emotions and accurately label what you're feeling, so you can begin to understand the specific needs that require attention from your developing toolkit.
That sounds like absolutely essential groundwork. So, to quickly recap for our listeners, in this episode, we introduced the concept of emotional first aid as a practical approach to managing everyday emotional challenges. We compared it to medical first aid, highlighting that it focuses on immediate comfort and coping strategies rather than deep therapeutic work. We also touched on the range of common emotional wounds this series will help you address. Ultimately, building your emotional first aid kit involves recognizing specific needs and then equipping yourself with the right tools to meet those needs.
Well said, Lisa. We've truly laid the foundation for our listeners. We've defined what emotional first aid is and why it's so essential for navigating life's inevitable difficulties. The ultimate goal here isn't to avoid difficult emotions altogether, but to have the resources and skills to manage them effectively when they arise.
And by the time we reach the end of this series, you'll have a personalized and robust emotional first aid kit ready for your use.
Exactly. So, get ready to learn how to identify those emotional wounds and begin building your personal toolkit.
I'm really excited for our listeners to begin this journey of enhanced self-care and increased resilience.
Next episode, recognizing the ache, identifying your emotional wounds. Welcome back to Emotional First Aid. Last time, we explored your emotional first aid kit. Now, let's focus on recognizing the ache.
It sounds simple, but our emotional wounds can be subtle. Sometimes we don't realize we're carrying them until they affect how we feel and act.
We're focusing on everyday hurts, disappointments, frustrations, feeling misunderstood. If left unattended, these can create bigger problems.
So, how do we begin to identify these wounds? What are we looking for?
First, tune into your feelings and, crucially, your physical sensations. Your body signals emotional issues. Think of stress manifesting as a tight chest or a knot in your stomach.
I've felt that stomach, not when worried. I used to think I needed to eat, but now I see it as my body flagging an emotional issue.
Precisely. Be a detective of your own body. When you feel discomfort, pause. Where do you feel it? What does it feel like? This physical awareness is your first clue.
Okay, I notice a physical sensation. What's next?
Connect that sensation to an emotion. Is that tightness anxiety? Is the churning nervousness or anger? We need to name these emotions like labeling a wound.
Naming emotions can be tough. I've often said fine when I'm not.
That's common. We're often conditioned to suppress emotions. But to identify a wound, we must explore what's beneath the surface. Fine isn't specific enough.
So, instead of fine, I should think I'm feeling anxious or I'm feeling disappointed.
Exactly. Let's think about common types of emotional hurts. These are the everyday wounds your kit might address.
That makes it feel less overwhelming. What are some categories?
First, rejection or not being enough. This occurs when we feel ignored, our ideas aren't accepted, or we compare ourselves unfavorably. It might feel like a hollow or sinking sensation.
That sting of feeling overlooked. It's like a small, sharp jab.
Absolutely. Then, failure or falling short. This is about not meeting our own expectations or feeling we've let ourselves down. It can create a feeling of heaviness or inadequacy.
That's a good distinction. It's the everyday I messed up rather than a catastrophe.
Precisely. Next is loneliness or disconnection. Even with people around, we can feel isolated. This might feel like coldness, emptiness, or being adrift.
That's powerful because it can sneak up on you. You can be in a room full of people and still feel alone.
Immensely so. Another is frustration and feeling stuck. When things don't go our way, it can create agitation or tension. This might show up as clenched fists or impatience.
That restless, antsy feeling. I recognize that.
And finally, guilt and self-blame. We replay something we did or didn't do and feel a heavy burden. This can manifest as a tight chest or a sick feeling.
So, to recap those common wound categories: rejection or not feeling enough, failure or falling short, loneliness or disconnection, frustration and feeling stuck, and guilt or self blame.
That's right. And remember, these are normal human experiences. The key is recognizing when they are more than a passing mood. How do you tell the difference?
That's the $1 million question.
A fleeting bad mood is temporary and passes relatively quickly. You can shake it off. An emotional wound, however, tends to linger. It impacts your thoughts, behaviors, and overall state for a longer period. It affects your outlook and decisions.
So if my bad mood disappears after sleep or a movie, it was a mood. But if that feeling of not being enough, or that frustration, sticks around for days and keeps popping up, then it's likely a wound.
Exactly. It's about persistence and impact. Do these feelings consistently affect your ability to function? Are they triggered by specific situations? And do they bring a discomfort deeper than annoyance?
This makes me think about how often I've dismissed those persistent feelings as just part of who I am.
That's a common trap. We can become accustomed to certain emotional discomforts. But the goal of emotional first aid is to acknowledge these hurts, to understand them, and then to heal. Identifying the wound is accurate assessment before treatment.
It's like a doctor knowing if it's a cut, bruise, or sprain before choosing a remedy.
A perfect analogy. So, we've talked about listening to your body for physical cues. We've connected those sensations to emotions, moving beyond fine to specific labels. We explored common wounds: rejection, failure, loneliness, frustration, and guilt. And we distinguished between a fleeting mood and a lingering wound.
This makes me feel equipped to start paying attention. It's like I have new tools for noticing when something's wrong.
That's the intention. By increasing awareness, we empower ourselves. We're actively identifying these hurts so we can begin to heal.
Moving forward, the key is to be mindful of physical sensations and name the emotions, especially if they're persistent.
Exactly. Next episode, we'll take this knowledge of recognizing the ache and discuss the art of bouncing back, specifically recovering from rejection.
Sounds like a vital step. I'm looking forward to it.
Welcome back. Last time, we built our emotional first aid kit and began identifying hurts. Today, we're diving deep into a particularly common experience: rejection.
Rejection. It's something everyone faces, right? Whether it's in careers, relationships, or even small social interactions, it can really sting.
Absolutely, Lisa. Rejection is a universal human experience. It's that feeling of being unwanted, excluded, or not good enough. It can leave us feeling bruised, sometimes deeply hurt. But just like a physical wound, it needs to be addressed with the right tools so it can heal. Think of this episode as learning how to tend to the scrapes and bruises that rejection leaves behind.
So, how do we start bouncing back from rejection? What are the first steps?
The first step, building on what we discussed about identifying our wounds, is to actually acknowledge the feeling of rejection. Don't try to stuff it down or pretend it didn't happen. Give yourself permission to feel that sting. It's a natural response to feeling like you've been pushed away or overlooked.
That makes sense. It's easy to want to just brush it off, but acknowledging it feels like the start of processing it.
Exactly. Once you've acknowledged the feeling, the next crucial step is to challenge the negative self-talk that often comes with rejection. Rejection can be a breeding ground for self-doubt. Our inner critic can start whispering things like, "See, I told you you weren't good enough," or "Everyone else is better than you." We need to actively push back against these thoughts.
How do we do that? It sounds tough to fight against that inner voice.
It is, but it's absolutely doable. We can start by reframing. Instead of thinking, "They rejected me because I'm flawed," try shifting to, "This situation didn't work out for reasons that might be completely unrelated to my worth." Perhaps the timing was off, or there were external factors at play that you couldn't control. We need to remember that rejection is often about fit, not fundamental flaws.
Reframing. I like that. So, we're not accepting the negative interpretation as the absolute truth. We're looking for other explanations.
Precisely. Think of it like this. If you trip and fall, do you immediately assume you're a fundamentally clumsy person incapable of walking? Of course not. You might check if the pavement was uneven or if you're distracted. We need to apply that same objective lens to rejection. Ask yourself, what else could be true here?
That's a great analogy, Alex. It helps to detach from the immediate emotional reaction and look at the situation more logically.
And that detachment is key. Another powerful tool is to focus on what you can control. Rejection often makes us feel powerless, like we've lost agency. But we always have control over our own actions, our own efforts, and our own growth. So, if you were rejected for a job, you can't control the hiring decision, but you can control updating your resume, practicing your interview skills, or learning new things to make yourself a stronger candidate next time.
So, it's about redirecting that energy that might be spent dwelling on the rejection into constructive action.
Exactly. It's about moving forward, not being stuck. And this leads us to another important aspect, learning from the experience. Every rejection, while painful, can be a valuable learning opportunity. What can you take away from it? Was there feedback that could help you improve? Was there a signal that this path wasn't the right one for you after all?
It's like turning a setback into a stepping stone.
That's a perfect way to put it, Lisa. And to really cement this, we need to talk about building what we call rejection resilience. This isn't about never feeling hurt by rejection, but about developing the capacity to bounce back more quickly and effectively.
And how do we build that resilience?
One of the most effective ways is to cultivate a strong sense of self-worth that is independent of external validation. When our self-esteem is low, rejection hits us much harder because we're already questioning our value. We need to nurture our internal sense of worth. This means recognizing our strengths, celebrating our accomplishments, big or small, and practicing self-compassion.
Self-compassion is so important, isn't it? Being kind to ourselves, especially when we're feeling down.
Immensely important. Imagine you have a friend who just experienced rejection. Would you berate them and tell them they're not good enough? No, you'd offer comfort and support. We need to extend that same kindness to ourselves. So, when you feel that sting of rejection, try speaking to yourself as you would a dear friend.
That really shifts the perspective. It's about internal validation rather than constantly seeking it from others.
You've got it. And remember how we identified our wounds? When dealing with rejection, it's also helpful to connect it back to any existing insecurities or past hurts. Sometimes, a new rejection can trigger old wounds. Recognizing this pattern can help us understand why we're reacting so strongly and address the deeper issues.
So, this new pain can sometimes be an echo of older ones. That's a really insightful point.
It is. And by addressing that echo, we can heal more fully. Now, let's recap some of the key takeaways for bouncing back from rejection. First, acknowledge the feeling. Don't ignore it. Second, challenge that negative self-talk. Reframe your thoughts and look for alternative explanations. Third, focus on what you can control, your actions, and your growth. Fourth, learn from the experience. Every rejection offers lessons. And finally, build your inner resilience by cultivating self-worth and practicing self-compassion.
That's a fantastic summary, Alex. It breaks down a complex emotional challenge into manageable steps. I feel like with these tools, rejection doesn't have to be an overwhelming experience. It can be something we process and grow from.
That's exactly the goal of emotional first aid. We're equipping you with the ability to tend to these hurts so they don't fester. Next episode, we'll be tackling another common challenge, learning from failure and how to move beyond it. Next episode, learning from the fall, processing and moving beyond failure. Welcome back to Emotional First Aid. Last time, we talked about bouncing back from rejection. Today, we're tackling failure.
Failure. That word alone can make us feel a little shaky. It's that moment when things don't go as planned, when we fall short of a goal. It can feel like a definitive end.
Exactly. But what if we could learn to see failure not as a tombstone, but as a stepping stone. That's what we're exploring today, learning from the fall, processing and moving beyond failure. We want to help you process failure, disentangle your sense of self from the outcome, and extract valuable lessons.
So, failure doesn't have to be the final word. We can actually use it to get stronger and smarter. How do we start doing that, Alex? It feels like the immediate reaction is to just beat ourselves up.
That's the common trap. Lisa, the first and perhaps most crucial step is to separate the event from your identity. When we fail at something, it's easy to say, I'm a failure, rather than, this attempt didn't work out. Can you see the difference?
Yes, that's a really important distinction. One is a label on who you are, and the other is about a specific situation. So, when something goes wrong, we need to consciously tell ourselves, okay, this specific thing didn't succeed, but that doesn't mean I, as a person, am a failure.
Precisely. Think of it like this. If you're baking a cake and it comes out flat, you don't suddenly become a flat cake person. You learn what might have gone wrong with that specific cake. Maybe too much liquid or the oven temperature was off. Your identity as a baker remains intact.
That's a great analogy. So, step one, detach yourself from the outcome. What's the next step in processing this failed event?
The next step is to analyze, but not in a self-punishing way. We want to conduct a constructive postmortem. Ask yourself, what actually happened? What were the contributing factors? This isn't about assigning blame, but about understanding the mechanics of the situation.
So, we're digging into the details, trying to figure out the why and how without getting stuck in the emotional turmoil. What kind of questions could we ask ourselves during this analysis?
Good question. You could ask, what was my role in this? Were there external factors I couldn't control? What information did I have at the time? Did I set realistic expectations? Sometimes we set ourselves up for disappointment with unrealistic goals.
That makes sense. And by asking these questions, we're gathering data, right? We're collecting information about what worked and what didn't. It's like being a detective of your own experience.
Exactly. You're building a case file for future reference. And importantly, this analysis should be focused on future improvement, not past regret. We're not dwelling on what should have been, but on what we can learn for next time.
So, we've separated our identity from the failure and we've analyzed what happened. What do we do with all this information? How do we move beyond it?
This is where we shift from processing to proactive learning. The lessons we've identified become the building blocks for our next endeavor. Remember how we talked about resilience in the last episode, building your inner strength? This is a direct application of that.
Right. So, if the key lesson from the failed attempt was that we didn't have enough information about a particular step, then our next attempt should involve more research or asking for expert advice.
Precisely. You've identified a gap, and now you have a strategy to fill it. Think of it as upgrading your toolkit. Failure is essentially a free lesson showing you which tools you need to sharpen or acquire. It's showing you where your current strategies might be lacking.
This reframes failure from a setback into a learning opportunity. It's like getting a preview of potential challenges and how to overcome them before they even happen again.
And this is where we can really reinforce concepts. We introduced the idea of an emotional first aid kit in episode 1. Processing failure and learning from it is like using a specific tool from that kit, perhaps a lesson extraction scalpel that carefully removes the valuable insights without damaging the rest of your emotional well-being.
I like that. A lesson extraction scalpel. And the ultimate goal isn't just to survive failure, but to use it to achieve greater success in the future. It actively fuels progress.
Absolutely. And this process is ongoing. We'll inevitably encounter more situations that don't go as planned. The key is to continually refine this method of processing and learning. It's about building a robust system for growth.
So, to recap for our listeners, first, remember that you are not your failure. Separate your identity from the outcome of a specific event. Second, analyze what happened objectively, like a detective, focusing on the factors involved without self-blame. Ask yourself what you can learn from the situation. And third, use those lessons to build on your strengths and refine your strategies so you're better equipped for your next attempt.
That's a perfect summary, Lisa. By adopting this approach, failure transforms from a source of shame into a powerful engine for personal growth and future achievement. It's about understanding that falling down is part of life, but staying down is a choice. And with the right tools, we can choose to get back up stronger and wiser.
It's about seeing those stumbles not as endpoints, but as detours that can lead to a richer journey. And building on that resilience we discussed, this is a core part of becoming more emotionally resilient.
Indeed, we're cultivating that inner strength that allows us to weather any storm. It takes practice, but the rewards are immense.
This has been incredibly helpful, Alex. It really shifts the perspective on something that feels so negative.
I'm glad to hear that. Remember, every experience, even those we label as failures, holds valuable lessons if we're willing to look for them. Next episode, The Loneliness Antidote, Cultivating Connection and Comfort. Welcome back to Emotional First Aid. Last time, we explored failure and how to learn from it. Today, we're tackling the quiet ache in our hearts, loneliness.
That's right, Alex. Loneliness. It's a common experience, but it can feel incredibly isolating. It's important to remember that loneliness is a real emotional wound, and it deserves our attention and care. It's not just about being alone, it's about feeling disconnected.
Exactly, Lisa. There's a difference between solitude, which can be peaceful, and loneliness, which carries sadness and longing. You can be surrounded by people and still feel profoundly lonely.
It's that internal feeling of having no one to truly share with. So, Alex, how do we begin to tackle this wound? What are our first aid steps for loneliness?
The first step is honest assessment. Acknowledge the feeling without judgment. Instead of pushing it away, recognize it. Think of it like noticing a cut. You acknowledge it so you can treat it. So, first, identify and accept the feeling of loneliness.
Okay, so acknowledging it is key. It's like saying, yes, I'm feeling lonely right now. What's next?
The next step is to explore the nature of that loneliness. Is it general disconnection or tied to a specific area of your life? Understanding the source helps us tailor our approach. Think about if your cut is shallow or deep. A deeper one needs more attention.
That makes sense. It's not one size fits all. Once we understand it better, how do we start to actively cultivate connection? That's where the antidote lies, isn't it?
Precisely. Cultivating connection is the core of the antidote. This happens by strengthening existing connections and building new ones. Let's start with strengthening what we already have. Often, when we feel lonely, we withdraw, which can push away the very people who care about us.
That's so true. You feel disconnected, so you pull back, which makes you feel even more disconnected. So, how do we actively strengthen those existing threads?
It's about intentional effort. Reach out to someone you haven't spoken to in a while. Send a text, make a call, suggest a coffee. It doesn't need to be a grand gesture. Sometimes a simple thinking of you can open a door. Also, be present when you are with people. Listen actively and share authentically about yourself. Vulnerability fosters deeper connection.
So, it's about making small, consistent efforts to engage with the people already in our lives. What about when those existing connections feel insufficient, or when someone truly feels they don't have many to begin with?
Then we turn to building new connections. This is where stepping outside our comfort zone becomes important. Think about joining groups or activities that align with your interests. If you love reading, join a book club. If you enjoy hiking, find a local hiking group. These shared interests provide a natural starting point for conversation and bonding.
That's a great point. It takes the pressure off trying to make conversation from scratch. Shared activities give you something concrete to talk about and bond over.
Exactly. And as you engage in these activities, remember the principles of connection we just discussed. Be present, listen actively, and be willing to share a little about yourself. Building relationships takes time and consistent effort, so don't get discouraged if you don't form deep friendships overnight.
I think that's a really important reminder. Patience is key. So we have two main prongs here: strengthening existing connections and building new ones. But what about when we're feeling that loneliness acutely and we can't immediately reach out or engage? What are some ways to offer ourselves comfort in those moments?
That's the self-soothing aspect of our emotional first aid kit. It's about learning to be your own comforting presence. This could involve engaging in activities that bring you joy and peace. Maybe it's listening to uplifting music, taking a warm bath, reading a favorite book, or spending time in nature. The goal is to create positive internal experiences that counterbalance the feelings of loneliness.
So, it's about consciously choosing activities that nurture us and make us feel good from the inside, even when we feel a lack of external connection. It's filling our own cup, so to speak.
Precisely. And practicing mindfulness can be incredibly helpful here. Mindfulness involves paying attention to the present moment without judgment. By observing your feelings of loneliness without getting swept away by them, you can create a sense of space and control. You can acknowledge the feeling, notice it, and then gently redirect your attention to something else: your breath, a sensation, a sound.
That's powerful. It's about not letting the feeling define us, but rather observing it as a temporary state. So, to recap, we've talked about: first, acknowledging and accepting loneliness as a valid emotional wound. Second, understanding the nature and source of our loneliness. Then, we explored the two pillars of building connection: strengthening existing relationships through intentional effort and authentic sharing, and cultivating new connections by engaging in shared interests. And finally, we covered the crucial element of self-soothing, using enjoyable activities and mindfulness to find comfort within ourselves.
You've summarized it beautifully, Lisa. And remember, these are tools. Like any tool, they require practice. Some days will be easier than others. But by consistently applying these strategies, you can begin to transform that quiet ache of loneliness into a feeling of belonging and inner peace. It's about tending to that wound with care and patience.
It really is. And this connects back to our earlier episodes, doesn't it? Understanding our emotions, as we did in episode 2, and developing resilience, which we'll explore later, are all foundational to managing loneliness. It's all part of that comprehensive emotional first aid kit.
Absolutely. It's all interconnected. And the journey of cultivating connection often leads to a stronger sense of self-esteem as well, something we'll delve into further down the line. For now, let's focus on these actionable steps. Reach out, engage, and be kind to yourself during this process.
Thank you, Alex. This has been incredibly insightful. We've given our listeners some really concrete strategies for tackling loneliness.
My pleasure. And next time, we'll be tackling another common challenge: breaking the loop of rumination. Welcome back to Emotional First Aid. Last time, we explored ways to combat loneliness and cultivate genuine connection. Today, we're tackling the relentless cycle of rumination.
Rumination. That word itself sounds like something stuck, doesn't it? It's that feeling of your mind getting caught in a loop, replaying a conversation, dwelling on a mistake, or worrying about what might happen. It feels like being trapped on a hamster wheel of negative thoughts.
Exactly, Lisa. And that's precisely what rumination is. Think of it as your brain's unproductive way of trying to solve a problem by constantly chewing on it, without actually finding a resolution. It's like endlessly watching the same news report about a crisis without ever taking action or finding a solution. We often get stuck in a loop of what if, why me, or I should have.
So, it's not just thinking about something, it's thinking about it over and over without making progress. It drains our energy and often makes us feel worse, not better. It's a major contributor to stress, anxiety, and even depression, isn't it?
Absolutely. And the danger is that it often feels like we're trying to do something by thinking so hard. We believe that if we just think about it enough, we'll find the answer or at least understand it better. But the reality is, rumination is a passive process. It keeps us stuck in the past or in anxious what ifs, preventing us from engaging with the present or taking constructive action. Remember when we talked about emotional wounds? Rumination is like picking at a wound instead of letting it heal. It keeps the pain fresh.
That makes perfect sense. The more we pick at it, the more it hurts. So, today's goal is to learn how to break that loop. What are our first steps in escaping rumination?
The first and most crucial step is awareness. You can't break a cycle if you don't realize you're in it. So, the invitation is to become a detective of your own thoughts. When you notice yourself spiraling, ask yourself, am I problem solving or am I ruminating? Is this thought leading to an action or a plan, or is it just circling back to the same worry or regret?
That's a great distinction. So, the awareness part is about recognizing the pattern of repetitive, unproductive thinking. It's not about judging yourself for having these thoughts, but simply noticing them.
Precisely. It's about detached observation. Once you're aware, the next powerful tool is interrupting the thought pattern. This can feel a bit jarring at first, but it's incredibly effective. Imagine your rumination is a song playing on repeat. You need to physically or mentally change the channel or stop the playback.
How do we do that in practice? Do we just tell ourselves to stop?
If only it were that simple. While telling yourself to stop can be a part of it, there are more active ways to interrupt. One is through distraction with intention. This isn't about mindlessly avoiding your feelings, but about shifting your mental focus to something that requires your engagement.
So, instead of thinking about the argument you had, you might intentionally focus on a complex task, like a work project or even a challenging puzzle.
Yes, or you could engage in a physical activity. A brisk walk, some gardening, or even just tidying up your space can be incredibly effective. The key is that it needs to occupy your cognitive resources. Another powerful interruption technique is mindful awareness of the present moment.
This sounds like something we might have touched on in previous episodes, perhaps when discussing coping mechanisms.
You're absolutely right, Lisa. Mindfulness is a cornerstone of emotional first aid. When you feel yourself starting to ruminate, bring your attention to your senses. What do you see right now? What do you hear? What can you feel? The chair beneath you, the air on your skin. This grounds you in the present, pulling you away from the replays of the past or the anxieties of the future. It's like anchoring yourself in a storm.
So, if I notice myself replaying that embarrassing moment from last week, I could deliberately focus on the feeling of my feet on the floor or the sounds in the room. It redirects my brain's focus.
Exactly. And it's not about suppressing the uncomfortable feelings, but about recognizing that your mind is trying to solve a problem in an unhelpful way and then gently guiding it elsewhere. Another technique that directly tackles the content of rumination is challenging your thoughts.
Challenging them? How so?
Think of your ruminative thoughts as assumptions. Are they absolutely true? Are there other ways to interpret the situation? You can ask yourself, what's the evidence for this thought not being true? Or what's a more balanced or helpful way to look at this? This requires critical thinking, which is the opposite of passive rumination.
So, if I'm dwelling on a mistake, I might ask myself, is this mistake really as catastrophic as I'm making it out to be? What did I learn from it that I can use moving forward? That's a different perspective.
It is, and it shifts you from being a victim of the thought to an active investigator of its validity. We also need to talk about behavioral activation. Sometimes rumination is a sign that we're avoiding taking action that might actually alleviate the problem or our feelings about it.
This ties back to what you said about rumination feeling like we're doing something but we're not actually moving forward.
Precisely. If you're ruminating about a difficult conversation you need to have, the solution isn't more thinking, it's having the conversation. If you're upset about a lack of accomplishment, the solution is to break down a goal and start working on it. Behavioral activation is about taking even a small, concrete step toward addressing the issue that's fueling the rumination.
So, the strategy is multi-pronged. Become aware, interrupt the pattern through distraction or mindfulness, challenge the thoughts themselves, and then take a small, actionable step. It sounds like a comprehensive approach to regaining control.
It truly is. And it's important to remember that these are skills. Like any skill, they take practice. There will be times when you slip back into the loop. That's okay. The important thing is to notice and then gently reapply these tools. We're not aiming for perfection, but for progress. And by breaking free from rumination, you're not just stopping negative thoughts, you're reclaiming your mental energy. This energy can then be redirected towards problem solving, creativity, connection, and ultimately, healing the emotional wounds we've discussed throughout this series.
When we're not caught in rumination, we have so much more capacity to engage with life, to be present with loved ones, and to actually work on the things that matter. It feels like unlocking a hidden reservoir of mental resource.
That's a perfect way to put it. So, to recap, breaking the cycle of rumination involves first, awareness, recognizing when you're caught in unproductive thought loops. Second, interruption, using techniques like mindful present moment awareness or focused distraction to break the chain of thought. Third, challenging automatic thoughts, questioning the validity and helpfulness of your ruminative interpretations. And finally, behavioral activation, taking small, concrete actions to address the underlying issues.
It's about shifting from a passive state of worry to an active state of engagement and problem solving. This is such a critical skill for our emotional first aid kit.
Indeed. Next episode, we'll explore how to release the heavy burden of guilt and self-blame, another common companion to rumination. Next episode, releasing the weight, managing guilt and self-blame. Welcome back. Last time, we explored how to break free from the cycle of rumination. Today, we're diving into guilt and self-blame.
Guilt. It's such a powerful emotion. It can feel like a heavy weight, can it? Like you're carrying around a burden that others can't see. And when it turns into self-blame, that weight can feel even heavier.
Exactly. And the first step to releasing that weight is understanding what guilt actually is. So, what is guilt and why does it show up?
Fundamentally, guilt is an emotional signal. It tells us we've done something or failed to do something that goes against our own internal moral code or values. It's a signal that we might have hurt someone, broken a rule, or fallen short of our own standards.
So, it's not necessarily a bad thing then. It's trying to guide us.
Precisely. Healthy guilt is actually a sign of a healthy conscience. It prompts us to apologize, to make amends, and to avoid repeating the behavior. Imagine a child who takes a toy without asking. They feel guilty, they return the toy, and they learn that taking things isn't okay. That's functional guilt. It helps us learn and grow.
That makes sense. The child learns a valuable lesson. But what happens when that guilt becomes overwhelming? When it's not just about returning a toy, but about a mistake that feels monumental?
That's when we can slip into self-blame, which is often an unhealthy, excessive form of guilt. Self-blame is when we internalize the wrongdoing so deeply that we start to define ourselves by it. We might think, I'm a bad person, instead of I did a bad thing. This can lead to a cycle of negative self-talk and a persistent feeling of unworthiness.
So, the distinction is between acknowledging a specific action versus labeling our entire identity. I made a mistake versus I am a mistake.
You've hit the nail on the head. Self-blame often involves imagining the worst possible outcome, where we magnify the impact of our actions and hold ourselves to impossibly high standards. It can also be fueled by perfectionism. If we believe we must always be perfect, any deviation can feel like a catastrophic failure.
That's so relatable. Many of us strive for perfection. But what are some practical ways we can start to release this weight, to move from self blame towards that healthier form of remorse that allows for growth?
The first strategy is what I call name it to tame it. This means consciously identifying the feeling. Are you experiencing guilt, shame, or regret? Naming the emotion helps to separate it from your overall sense of self. Simply saying to yourself, I am feeling guilty about X, can create a little distance.
So, instead of just feeling this amorphous badness, we're pinpointing the specific emotion.
Exactly. The next step is to evaluate the guilt. Ask yourself, is this guilt based on reality? Did I actually harm someone or violate a core value? Or is it based on assumptions, anxieties, or unrealistic expectations? This is where we try to differentiate between healthy remorse and what we might call unearned guilt, the kind that's often a result of overthinking or taking on responsibility that isn't ours.
That's a crucial distinction. So, if it's reality based, does that mean we have to punish ourselves?
Not at all. If the guilt is reality-based, the goal is not punishment, but repair and learning. This is where taking responsibility comes in, but not in a punitive way. It means acknowledging your part in the situation. This could involve making a genuine apology, where you express regret for your actions and their impact. The key is sincerity and a commitment to learning.
And what if an apology isn't possible or the harm was done long ago?
In those cases, we focus on internal repair. This can involve consciously practicing self-compassion. We often talk about self-compassion as if it's selfish, but it's actually a vital tool for emotional health. It means treating yourself with the same kindness and understanding you would offer a friend who had made a mistake.
That's a wonderful framing, Lisa. Treating ourselves like we would a dear friend.
Think of it this way. If your friend made a mistake, would you constantly berate them, calling them names and telling them they're worthless? Probably not. You'd likely offer support and encourage them to learn and move forward. We need to extend that same grace to ourselves.
So, self compassion is about reframing our internal dialogue.
Precisely. It's about acknowledging that making mistakes is part of the human experience. We all fall short sometimes. Another powerful tool is to reframe the narrative. Instead of dwelling on the mistake as a character flaw, what can you learn from it? What insights did it offer about your values, your boundaries, or your relationships? This shifts your focus from the past failure to future growth.
This is like turning the wound into a lesson, as we've discussed in previous episodes. The pain of guilt can actually inform us.
Exactly. And sometimes, the guilt we feel isn't even ours to carry. We can absorb the guilt of others or feel responsible for things entirely outside of our control. This is where boundaries become important. Learning to say no and recognizing where our responsibility ends is crucial for preventing unearned guilt.
So, we need to be mindful of what truly belongs to us emotionally.
Yes. A practice that can be incredibly helpful here is journaling. Writing down your thoughts and feelings about the guilt can help you process them more objectively. You can explore the situation, your role in it, your feelings, and what you want to do moving forward. It's like emptying out your emotional backpack onto paper, which makes it feel much lighter.
That's concrete advice. And to recap for our listeners, we've talked about identifying guilt as a signal, differentiating between healthy remorse and debilitating self blame, and then employing tools like naming the emotion, evaluating its reality, practicing self compassion, reframing negative narratives, setting boundaries, and using journaling to process.
You've summarized it perfectly, Alex. It's about acknowledging past actions without letting them define your present or future. It's about releasing the weight so you can move forward with a clearer conscience and a stronger sense of self.
And that leads us nicely into our next episode, where we'll be delving into acknowledging the void and coping with loss and grief.
Indeed. So, join us next time as we continue to build our toolkit for navigating life's emotional challenges.
Until then, take care of yourselves and remember the power of releasing that weight. Welcome back to Emotional First Aid. Today, we're tackling acknowledging the void, coping with loss and grief.
Loss is such a profound experience, isn't it, Alex? It's something we all face, but it often feels incredibly isolating. And it's not just about losing people we love.
Exactly, Lisa. It's important to remember that loss comes in many forms. Of course, there's the deep sorrow that comes from losing a loved one. But we can also grieve the loss of a cherished relationship, a job that defined us, a dream we held dear, or even a significant life phase that has passed. Think about the end of school year or moving away from a childhood home. These are all forms of loss that bring their own unique kind of grief.
That's a really helpful distinction. It's easy to think of grief solely in terms of bereavement, but I can see how losing other important parts of our lives can create a very real void. So, how do we begin to acknowledge this void when it feels so overwhelming?
The first step, and it's a crucial one, is to give yourself permission to feel. So many of us are taught to be strong or move on quickly, but grief isn't something that just disappears with time. It needs to be acknowledged, to be felt. Imagine your grief like a wave. Sometimes it's a gentle ripple, and other times it's a towering tsunami. Trying to suppress that wave is like trying to hold back the ocean. It's exhausting and ultimately it doesn't work.
Permission to feel. That sounds so simple, yet for many of us, it's incredibly difficult. We worry about burdening others, or we judge ourselves for our sadness.
It is difficult, but it's essential for healing. And this connects back to what we discussed in episode 2 about recognizing our emotional wounds. Grief is a wound, one of the deepest we can experience. To begin healing, we have to gently touch that wound, understand its shape and depth without judgment. This means allowing yourself to cry, to feel angry, to feel confused, or whatever emotions surface. There's no right way to grieve.
So, instead of trying to fix the feeling immediately, we're accepting that the feeling is there and it's okay. What are some gentle ways to touch this wound, as you put it?
One of the most powerful ways is through storytelling and expression. Journaling is a fantastic tool. Write down your memories, your feelings, your fears. You don't need to write a polished essay. Just let the words flow. For some, talking it out with a trusted friend, family member, or a therapist is crucial. Creating art, music, or even just sketching can be a way to express emotions that are hard to put into words. It's about finding a safe outlet for what's inside.
I can see how expressing it externally can help make it feel less overwhelming internally. It's like taking something heavy from inside yourself and placing it out where you can see it, and perhaps even share the load.
Precisely. And what about honoring the loss? When we've lost a person, often we create memorials, share stories, or celebrate their life. We can apply this to other forms of loss too. If you've lost a significant career opportunity, perhaps you create a vision board for a new path or write a letter to your past aspirations acknowledging their value. If it's the loss of a relationship, perhaps you create a gratitude box for the good times or write down the lessons learned. This isn't about dwelling on the past, but about acknowledging its significance and the impact it had on us.
That's a beautiful way to think about it, honoring what was and acknowledging the space it occupied in our lives. It helps to validate the significance of what we've lost, rather than just feeling like it's gone, and therefore irrelevant.
Exactly. And this leads to the idea of creating space for grief. Some cultures have formal mourning periods. While we may not have those structured traditions in our daily lives, we can intentionally create moments for reflection. This could be a quiet walk in nature, a dedicated time each week to think about your loss, or even lighting a candle in remembrance. It's about carving out a little bit of sanctuary in your day to simply be with your emotions without pressure.
Sanctuary is a good word for it. Life moves so fast, and it can feel like there's no room for this deep grieving. Creating that space sounds like a gentle act of self-care.
It truly is. Remember, grief is not linear. It ebbs and flows. There will be good days and incredibly difficult days. On those tough days, be exceptionally kind to yourself. That means prioritizing rest, nourishing your body, and allowing yourself to feel whatever comes up without judgment. It's okay to step back from responsibilities if you need to.
This ties into building our resilience later on. It's not about never feeling pain, but about having the tools to navigate it when it arises. So, to recap for our listeners, loss is more than just bereavement. It can be the loss of relationships, opportunities, or life phases. The first step in coping is giving yourself permission to feel grief without judgment.
That's right, Lisa. And to help with that, we can use tools like journaling, talking to others, or creative expression. Honoring what was lost, whether through remembrance or by acknowledging its lessons, is also a vital part of the process. And finally, intentionally creating space for grief and being incredibly gentle with ourselves, especially on difficult days, is key.
It's about acknowledging the void, but understanding that it doesn't have to remain empty forever. It can be a space where healing and eventually new growth can occur.
Beautifully put. This is a deeply personal journey, and your path through grief will be unique. Be patient with yourself and know that seeking support is a sign of strength, not weakness.
Thank you, Alex. That's a really compassionate and practical way to approach something so challenging.
Next episode, we'll be rebuilding the foundation by rekindling self-esteem. Welcome back to Emotional First Aid. Last time, we delved into the tough process of coping with loss and grief. Today, we're shifting focus to rebuilding something fundamental within ourselves.
That's right, Alex. After dealing with rejection, failure, loneliness, guilt, and loss, our sense of self can take a real beating. In this episode, we're diving into rekindling self-esteem. How do we actually rebuild that foundation when it feels shaky?
Self-esteem isn't about arrogance. It's about a realistic, positive view of yourself. It's appreciating your strengths, accepting weaknesses, and believing you are worthy. Think of it like the foundation of a house. If that foundation is cracked, the whole structure is unstable.
And those cracks can appear from all the things we've discussed. Rejection can make us feel inadequate. Failure can make us feel incompetent. Loneliness can make us feel unlovable. It's a tough cycle. How do we start patching up that foundation?
One of the most powerful tools is challenging our negative self-talk. We all have an inner critic, right? That voice that points out every flaw and mistake. The first step is to become aware of it. What does this inner critic actually say? Is it fair? Is it true?
I can think of a few things my inner critic likes to chime in with. It often focuses on perceived imperfections or past mistakes. So, if I catch myself thinking something like, I'm so stupid for making that mistake, what's the next step in challenging it?
Great question. The next step is to question the evidence. Ask yourself, is this statement really true, or is it an exaggeration or a biased judgment? You can reframe that thought. Instead of, I'm so stupid for making that mistake, you could say, I made a mistake and I'm learning from it. Everyone makes mistakes, and it doesn't define my intelligence.
So, it's about accuracy and balance. My inner critic might say I'm a complete failure, but the reality is I've succeeded at many things. I need to remind myself of those successes.
Precisely. And that leads us to another key strategy. Focus on your strengths and accomplishments. We tend to fixate on our weaknesses. We need to actively recall and acknowledge our strengths. What are you good at? What have you achieved, no matter how small it might seem?
Sometimes those accomplishments feel so distant, especially if we've been feeling down for a while. It can be helpful to actually write them down, couldn't it? Like keeping a journal of wins.
Absolutely. A strengths journal or an accomplishment log can be incredibly powerful. Every day, or at least a few times a week, write down one thing you did well or one positive quality you demonstrated. It could be something as simple as handling a difficult conversation calmly, finishing a task, or even just being a good listener to a friend. Over time, this creates a tangible record of your competence and worth.
I like that. It's like gathering evidence to contradict the negative narrative. So, we have challenging negative self talk and focusing on strengths. What else can we do to rebuild self esteem?
Another crucial element is practicing self-compassion. This means treating yourself with the same kindness, understanding, and support that you would offer to a good friend who is struggling. When we err or face difficulties, our tendency can be to berate ourselves. Self-compassion says, "This is hard right now, and it's okay to feel this way. I'm going to be gentle with myself."
That's a really different approach for many people. We're often much harder on ourselves than we would ever be on someone else. So, instead of thinking, I can't believe I messed that up, it's more like, this is tough, but I'm doing my best. I'll be okay.
Exactly. And this ties into accepting imperfections. Nobody is perfect, and striving for perfection is often a recipe for disappointment. Learning to accept your flaws and mistakes as part of being human is a huge step in building robust self-esteem. It's about progress, not perfection.
This feels like a gradual process, though. Rebuilding self esteem isn't an instant fix, is it? It takes consistent effort.
It is definitely a process. And part of that process is surrounding yourself with supportive people. Who in your life builds you up rather than tears you down? Spend more time with those individuals. Limit your exposure to those who consistently criticize or belittle you. Our relationships significantly impact how we feel about ourselves.
That makes sense. If you're constantly around people who make you feel bad, it's much harder to believe in yourself. It's like trying to grow a plant in rocky, infertile soil.
A perfect analogy, Lisa, and to foster that supportive internal environment even further, we can practice mindfulness. Mindfulness helps us to observe our thoughts and feelings without judgment. By paying attention to our present experience, we can catch those negative thought patterns as they arise and choose a different response.
So, if I'm feeling a wave of self doubt, mindfulness helps me notice it without getting swept away by it. I can observe the feeling, acknowledge it, and then decide not to let it define my entire reality.
Precisely. It gives you that pause, that space between the stimulus, the negative thought or feeling, and your reaction. And by consistently practicing these strategies, challenging negative self-talk, focusing on strengths, practicing self-compassion, accepting imperfections, nurturing supportive relationships, and practicing mindfulness, we begin to solidify that foundation of self-esteem. We are essentially retraining our minds to recognize our inherent value.
It sounds like we're actively building a more positive internal narrative. We're not just waiting for our self esteem to magically appear, we're working to create it. Remember, listeners, building self esteem is about recognizing your worth, challenging those critical inner voices with facts and self compassion, and celebrating your strengths and accomplishments, no matter how small. It's a journey of self acceptance and consistent, kind effort.
And the beauty of it is that a stronger sense of self-esteem makes us more resilient. When we face challenges, and we will, because that's life, a solid foundation means we're less likely to crumble. We can bounce back more effectively. We've now covered recognizing our wounds, recovering from rejection and failure, combating loneliness, escaping rumination, managing guilt, coping with loss, and now rebuilding our self-esteem. These are all interconnected pieces of our emotional first aid kit.
It's amazing how all these topics build on each other. We're truly learning to create a comprehensive toolkit for navigating life's emotional challenges.
Indeed. And in our next episode, episode 10, we'll take these foundational skills and put them to work by developing your inner strength, building on this newfound or rekindled self-esteem. We'll explore what resilience truly means in practice.
So, next time we're talking about the Resilience Toolkit and developing your inner strength. Don't miss it.
Welcome back to Emotional First Aid. In our last episode, we explored how to rekindle your self-esteem, giving you a stronger foundation to stand on.
That's right, Alex. And today, we're building on that solid ground by diving into the heart of what helps us navigate all of life's inevitable bumps and bruises: resilience. We're calling this episode the Resilience Toolkit, Developing Your Inner Strength.
Resilience is a word we hear a lot, but what does it really mean in practice? At its core, resilience is your ability to bounce back from adversity. It's not about avoiding challenges or never feeling upset. Instead, it's about how effectively you can recover and adapt when things get tough. Think of it like a sturdy tree in a storm. It might bend and sway, but it doesn't break.
I like that analogy, Alex. So, it's not about being unaffected, but about being able to recover. How do we actively develop this inner strength, this ability to bounce back?
Great question, Lisa. Resilience isn't something you're just born with or without. It's a skill, or rather, a collection of skills that you can learn and strengthen over time. We'll be looking at several key components of resilience today, and I want to emphasize that these build upon what we've already discussed in this series.
So, it's a culmination of sorts. What's the first key component?
The first, and perhaps most fundamental, is positive outlook. This doesn't mean ignoring the bad stuff. It means cultivating a belief in your own ability to cope and to find solutions. It's about seeing challenges not as insurmountable roadblocks, but as opportunities for growth. Remember how we talked about self-esteem in the last episode? A positive outlook is deeply connected to believing you are capable.
So, if I'm facing a setback, instead of thinking this is the end of the world, a resilient person might think, this is difficult, but I can figure out how to get through it.
Exactly. And to foster this positive outlook, you can practice positive self-talk. When negative thoughts creep in, actively challenge them. Ask yourself, is this thought truly accurate? What is a more balanced or helpful way to look at this? It takes practice, but gradually you can retrain your brain. Another great tool is gratitude. Regularly acknowledging what you are thankful for, no matter how small, shifts your focus from what's lacking to what's present.
I can see how shifting our mental focus can make a big difference. What else is in this resilience toolkit?
The second key component is acceptance. This is about acknowledging and accepting the reality of difficult situations without getting stuck in denial or excessive rumination. We've touched upon rumination in episode 6, which is that cycle of constantly replaying negative thoughts. Acceptance means saying, this is happening, and then moving on to adapt and cope, rather than trying to fight against something that is already a fact.
That sounds challenging. How do we accept something we might not want to accept?
It is challenging, which is why it's a skill to be developed. Acceptance doesn't mean liking the situation or condoning it. It simply means recognizing its presence. When you accept a difficult reality, you free up your energy to focus on what you can control, your response. Think about someone facing a chronic illness. Acceptance isn't saying, I'm fine. It's acknowledging the reality of the illness and then focusing on managing symptoms and living the best life possible within those circumstances.
So, it's about working with what you have instead of fighting against what you can't change.
Precisely. The third pillar of resilience is problem-solving skills. This is about your ability to identify problems, brainstorm solutions, and take action. When you encounter a challenge, instead of feeling overwhelmed, you break it down into manageable steps. You ask yourself, what is the immediate problem? What are my options? What is the best course of action, given my resources?
This ties back to our earlier episodes on recognizing and processing wounds, doesn't it? If you understand what the actual problem is, you're better equipped to solve it.
Absolutely. And to enhance your problem-solving skills, you can actively practice. When a small issue arises, deliberately take a moment to map out your approach. Don't just react. Think through the steps. You can even keep a journal of problems you've successfully navigated. Seeing a record of your problem-solving successes can boost your confidence the next time a challenge arises.
That's a great idea for memory anchoring, seeing concrete evidence of your capabilities. What's next in the toolkit?
Number 4, strong social connections. Humans are fundamentally social beings. Having a supportive network of friends, family, or colleagues is crucial for resilience. When you're going through a tough time, knowing you have people to talk to lean on, or who can offer a different perspective can make all the difference. We discussed the loneliness antidote back in episode 5. This is where those connections really pay off.
It's so true. Sometimes just talking things through with someone you trust can lighten the load immensely.
It really can. And building these connections means actively investing time and effort, regularly checking in with loved ones, being a good listener yourself, and being willing to ask for help when you need it are all part of strengthening your social support system. It's a two-way street.
So, we have positive outlook, acceptance, problem-solving skills, and strong social connections. That's a powerful combination.
It is. And the fifth key component is self-care. This might sound simple, but it's often the first thing to go when we're stressed. Self-care includes everything from getting enough sleep and eating nutritious food to engaging in activities that you enjoy and find relaxing. It's about replenishing your physical and emotional resources so you have the energy to face challenges.
This makes so much sense. You can't run on empty and expect to bounce back effectively.
Exactly. Think of self-care as building your reserves. If your car is running on fumes, it won't get very far. Similarly, if you're depleted, your resilience will suffer. So, regularly engaging in activities that recharge you, whether it's exercise, meditation, spending time in nature, or pursuing a hobby, is vital for maintaining your resilience.
We've covered so much today: positive outlook, acceptance, problem solving, social connections, and self care. It really feels like a comprehensive toolkit for building inner strength.
It is Lisa. And remember, these components are not independent. They all work together. A positive outlook can help you engage in self-care. Strong social connections can provide support for problem solving. Acceptance can make it easier to maintain a positive outlook.
So, rather than trying to tackle one thing at a time, we can think about how they all support each other.
Precisely. And an exercise to help integrate these is to identify one small area you can focus on this week for each component. For positive outlook, perhaps you'll practice gratitude for 5 minutes each morning. For problem solving, you might consciously break down a small task into steps. For social connections, reach out to a friend you haven't spoken to in a while. For self-care, schedule a short break to do something you enjoy.
That's a very actionable approach. It makes these big concepts feel much more manageable.
And that's the goal. Resilience isn't about being invincible. It's about being adaptable and continuing to move forward, even when life throws its curveballs. By consciously cultivating these skills, you're not just preparing for hardship, you're empowering yourself to live a more fulfilling and robust life.
So, to recap, resilience is our ability to bounce back from adversity, and we've explored the key components of the Resilience Toolkit: maintaining a positive outlook, practicing acceptance, developing strong problem solving skills, nurturing social connections, and prioritizing self-care. These are all interconnected and strengthen each other.
Exactly. And cultivating these skills is an ongoing journey. It takes awareness, intention, and consistent practice. But the reward is a profound sense of inner strength and the confidence to navigate whatever life brings your way.
Thank you, Alex. This has been incredibly insightful.
My pleasure, Lisa. And as we reach the penultimate episode of our series, remember that resilience is your superpower against life's storms. Next episode, we will be taking these tools and applying them to address lingering emotional wounds, looking at advanced emotional band-aids. Welcome back. Last time we fortified our inner strength with the Resilience Toolkit. Today, let's tackle lingering emotional wounds.
That sounds like exactly what we need, Alex. Sometimes a simple band-aid isn't enough, right? We've talked about identifying wounds, bouncing back, and building resilience, but what happens when those hurts stick around and feel harder to heal?
Precisely, Lisa. In episode 2, we touched on recognizing the signs of an emotional wound, that ache, that discomfort. Today, we're expanding on that. Think about it like this. A surface scratch might just need a quick clean and a standard band-aid, but a deeper cut or one that gets re-injured needs more attention. Lingering emotional wounds are like those deeper cuts. They might manifest as persistent feelings of sadness, anxiety, or a general sense of unease that doesn't seem to go away easily.
So, how do we identify these deeper cuts when they might not be as obvious?
Great question. Often, these lingering wounds are tied to underlying beliefs we hold about ourselves or the world. Remember when we discussed self-esteem in episode 9? Lingering wounds can be a symptom of low self-esteem. For example, someone who constantly experiences imposter syndrome, the feeling that they aren't good enough despite evidence of success, might be dealing with a lingering wound from past criticisms or failures that they haven't fully processed.
So it's not just about the event itself, but how we internalize it and what it tells us about ourselves.
Exactly. These wounds can also stem from unresolved grief, as we discussed in episode 8. If we haven't fully acknowledged and worked through the pain of loss, it can resurface in various ways, creating a constant undercurrent of sorrow or emptiness. Another common source is recurrent feelings of guilt or shame, which we explored in episode 7. When these emotions become a default setting rather than a temporary response, they indicate a deeper wound that needs tending.
It sounds like we need to look beyond the immediate feeling and try to understand its roots.
That's the core of it. We need to become emotional detectives for ourselves. Once we've identified a lingering wound, perhaps it's a persistent fear of failure, a deep-seated insecurity, or a cycle of negative self-talk, we need to apply more advanced tools from our emotional first aid kit. We can't just patch it up and hope for the best.
What kind of advanced tools are we talking about?
We can start by revisiting some of the strategies we've already learned, but with a more focused intensity. For instance, if rumination is keeping a wound open, as we discussed in episode 6, we need to employ more systematic techniques to break that loop. This might involve actively challenging those negative thoughts, not just observing them. It's about asking ourselves, is this thought actually true? What evidence do I have against it? What's a more balanced perspective?
So, it's like actively practicing what we preach about cognitive reframing, but with a more determined effort for these persistent issues.
Precisely. Another advanced technique involves what's sometimes called compassionate self-inquiry. This is where we treat ourselves with the same kindness and understanding we would offer a dear friend who is struggling. Instead of criticizing ourselves for feeling a certain way, we acknowledge the pain and ask, what do I need right now? It's about offering comfort and validation to ourselves.
That's a powerful shift, moving from self-criticism to self-compassion. It feels like it directly combats the self-blame we talked about in episode 7.
Absolutely. And it also builds on the self-esteem work from episode 9. When we treat ourselves with compassion, we are essentially reinforcing our inherent worth. We are saying, I am deserving of care, even when I'm hurting. This helps to slowly rewrite those negative internal narratives that often fuel lingering wounds.
What about when the wound feels too big to tackle alone? Are there external resources we should consider?
That's an incredibly important point, Lisa. Advanced emotional band-aids sometimes involve seeking professional help. There's absolutely no shame in consulting a therapist or counselor. They're trained to help us understand the roots of these deeper wounds, whether they stem from past trauma, complex grief, or deeply ingrained patterns of thinking and behaving. They provide a safe space and specialized tools that can accelerate healing.
So, recognizing the limits of our self-help toolkit and knowing when to reach out for expert support is also part of advanced emotional first aid.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that healing isn't always a solo journey. Sometimes external support is the most effective and advanced tool we can use. We also need to be patient. Lingering wounds didn't form overnight, and they won't disappear overnight either. Healing is a process, and it requires consistent effort and self-kindness.
So, to recap this episode on advanced emotional band-aids and addressing lingering wounds, we've learned that these aren't surface-level issues. They often connect to deeper beliefs about ourselves, unresolved past experiences like grief or failure, and can be symptoms of lower self-esteem or persistent guilt. Identifying them requires looking for recurring patterns of negative emotions and self-talk. To address them, we can intensify our current strategies like challenging rumination, practice compassionate self-inquiry, and importantly, recognize when professional help is the most advanced and effective tool available.
You've hit the nail on the head, Lisa. It's about applying our growing understanding and toolkit with greater intention and, when needed, seeking the right kind of support. We're learning to move beyond just patching things up to genuine, lasting emotional repair.
It's empowering to know we have these strategies.
It truly is. And this sets us up perfectly for our final episode, where we'll bring all of this together into your personal, comprehensive emotional first aid plan.
That sounds like the ultimate guide.
It is. So, next episode, we'll be creating your personal emotional first aid plan. We're creating your personal emotional first aid plan now.
It's like assembling a custom toolkit, Alex. We've gathered so many amazing strategies, and now it's time to organize them so they're ready when we need them most. I'm really excited to lay out a clear path for continuing this work.
Exactly, Lisa. Remember when we introduced the idea of emotional first aid? It's about having immediate, helpful responses ready for when those emotional bumps and bruises show up. We learn to recognize these wounds, from the sting of rejection to the heavy weight of guilt.
And we discovered that these aren't just abstract concepts. We talked about identifying feelings, the physical sensations that come with them, and how our thoughts can amplify or soothe them. It's about being aware of our internal landscape, isn't it?
Absolutely. Think back to when we learned to identify the ache. We broke down how rejection feels, perhaps like a tightening in your chest, or how failure might manifest as a sinking feeling. This awareness is the first step to applying any kind of aid.
Then, we tackled the tough stuff head on, bouncing back from rejection and learning from failure. We learned that these aren't dead ends, but opportunities for growth if we process them constructively.
We talked about shifting our perspective. Instead of seeing rejection as a personal indictment, we can view it as information, perhaps a mismatch in needs or circumstances. And failure? It's often just a stepping stone, providing valuable lessons for the next attempt. Remember the idea of failing forward?
I do. It's about extracting the learning without getting stuck in the disappointment. And speaking of being stuck, other episodes were so important. We discussed the loneliness antidote, teaching us the power of genuine connection.
Yes, and it's not just about being around people, but about feeling truly seen and understood. We explored ways to cultivate comfort and build those meaningful relationships that act as a buffer against isolation.
And then we learned about breaking the loop of rumination. That one felt especially practical. Learning to catch those repetitive negative thoughts and redirecting our mental energy. It's like gently pulling yourself out of a mental whirlpool.
It is. We learn techniques to interrupt those thought patterns, to question their validity, and to replace them with more balanced or productive thinking. It's a skill that definitely gets stronger with practice.
And speaking of strong emotions, we dealt with guilt, self-blame, and grief. Releasing the weight of guilt can be incredibly freeing. We talked about distinguishing between appropriate remorse and unwarranted self-punishment.
Precisely. Guilt can be a signal to make amends, while self-blame can be a corrosive habit. We also explored acknowledging the void that comes with loss. Grief is a natural and often prolonged process, and we learned that allowing ourselves to feel it is crucial for healing.
It's about honoring the loss without letting it consume us. Then, we focused on rebuilding and strengthening our inner resources. Rekindling self-esteem is so fundamental, isn't it?
It truly is. We learn to challenge negative self-talk and focus on our strengths and accomplishments. We developed the Resilience Toolkit, building that inner strength that helps us withstand life storms. Resilience isn't about never falling. It's about how well we get back up.
And just last time, we delved into advanced emotional band-aids, addressing those lingering wounds that might need a bit more focused attention. We looked at how to revisit and reprocess past hurts that still have a grip.
So here we are. We've covered a lot of ground, from understanding our emotional wounds to building our inner resilience. Now, let's create your personal emotional first aid plan. This isn't a one-size-fits-all prescription. It's a flexible, personalized guide.
So, Alex, how do we start building this plan? What are the key components?
The first step is awareness and recognition. This means regularly checking in with yourself. What emotions are you feeling? What are the physical sensations? And what thoughts are accompanying them? This is where we begin by simply noticing.
So, at the start of each day, or perhaps even more frequently, just pause and ask, how am I feeling right now? And then explore that feeling a little without judgment.
Exactly. The second component is your go-to tools. Based on what we've discussed, what strategies are most effective for you? Think about the tools we covered for specific challenges. For rejection, perhaps it's reframing the situation or reaching out to a supportive friend. For failure, maybe it's focusing on what you learned or breaking down the next step into smaller pieces. For loneliness, it could be scheduling a call with someone you care about or engaging in a solitary activity you enjoy to build self-connection. For rumination, your tool might be a mindful breathing exercise or a thought-stopping technique. For guilt, it could be an apology if appropriate, or practicing self-compassion. For grief, this might involve journaling, engaging in a memorial activity, or simply allowing yourself time and space to feel. For low self-esteem, your tool could be listing your accomplishments or practicing positive affirmations.
This is where we personalize. So I'd go through that list and think, when I felt rejected last week, what actually helped me feel a bit better? Maybe it was talking to my sister. So, my tool for rejection is reaching out to my sister or writing down 3 things I appreciate about myself.
Perfect. The third component is your support system. Who are the people you can turn to? This could be friends, family, a therapist, a mentor, or even a supportive online community. Knowing who to call when you're in distress is vital.
It's about having a pre-identified list of people and understanding how they best support you. So, for me, my friend Sarah is great at just listening without trying to fix things. My partner is good at practical problem solving. I need to know who to go to for what.
That's a crucial distinction. The fourth component is routine and practice. Emotional first aid isn't just for emergencies, it's also for preventative care. Scheduling time for activities that boost your well being, like exercise, mindfulness, hobbies, or creative pursuits, is key.
So, it's not just about reacting when things go wrong, but actively building our emotional strength day to day. Like going for that walk even when I don't feel like it because I know it lifts my mood.
Precisely. And finally, flexibility and review. Your emotional first aid plan isn't static. Life changes, and so will your needs. You should revisit your plan periodically, perhaps every few months, to see what's working, what needs adjusting, and what new tools you might want to incorporate.
So, to recap, Alex, our personal emotional first aid plan will involve 1. Awareness and recognition, actively checking in with our emotions. 2. Your go to tools, identifying specific strategies that work for each challenge. 3. Your support system, knowing who to reach out to for help. 4. Routine and practice, proactively engaging in well being activities. And 5. Flexibility and review, regularly updating our plan as needed.
You've got it, Lisa. Creating this plan empowers you. It puts you in the driver's seat of your emotional well being. You're not just hoping to cope, you're actively prepared. You have your personalized toolkit, ready to be opened and used whenever life presents you with emotional wounds, big or small.
And the beauty of it is that the more we use these tools and practice these habits, the stronger our emotional resilience becomes. It's an ongoing journey, but with a plan, it feels so much more manageable and less overwhelming.
This has been an incredible series, and I'm so proud of everyone who has joined us on this journey. Remember, your emotional first aid kit is always with you, waiting to be utilized. Continue to practice, to learn, and to be kind to yourselves.
Thanks for listening to the series.